It's lovely to see you all. I would like to take a moment to remind us all and to ask you all to firmly place your feet on the ground where you are today and acknowledge that we are all on unceded lands, lands that have been cared for millennia by First Nations people. These places have always been places of education and learning, and as we come to you today, and I come to you from the lands of the Yuggera people and the Turrbal people here in Meanjin in Brisbane, I pay my respects to the thousands of years of knowledge exchange that has happened here in this place, and all of the places that you're at today always was, always will be Aboriginal land. So thank you. Thanks again, everybody. I would like to kick us off today by welcoming our special guest. Our special guest today is Sophie Ratcliff. She's clinical consultant and educator in research and knowledge translation with Orygen, Australia's Centre of Excellence in Youth Mental Health. Sophie is going to talk to us today about school refusal, and talk about a practice toolkit that's been developed, and she was one of the authors of the toolkit, and talk around support with schools and services in responding to what we're seeing. I know we're seeing it here at LWB, but it's the complex issue of school refusal, and we're seeing increasing rates of it here. We know that it's one of the top-rated non-attendance records that we have for our children and young people in out-of-home care. So it's really timely, particularly at this time of the year. We're looking at the end of term one, and the sooner we can get on top of some of these things, the better it is for our young people heading into the remainder of the year. So I know you'll all join with me as I thank Sophie. Welcome, Sophie, and thanks for coming along today.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's great to see everyone and to continue this conversation and thinking about school refusal. And as Megan mentioned, we developed these resources 3 years ago. So it's been on our mind thinking about school refusal, and it's great to hear that people are still really engaged and thinking about this topic. So I'll just share my screen. And please let me know if I'm quiet or if I need to speak up, or if there's any other technical issues. So is that working well for everyone? Thumbs up? Great, thank you. So as Megan mentioned, my name's Sophie. I use she, her pronouns. And so my background is as a clinical psychologist. And so after my training, I worked at Headspace centres, and that gave me a really great opportunity to actually go into schools across an area of regional Victoria, so around the Ballarat region. And I think having that early in my career also helped me to appreciate the different ways schools can work, as even in this little region, that there can be very different school cultures, school environments, wellbeing teams. And I think those are all things that we kind of think about when we think about school refusal as well, the environments that young people are going into. And my work at Orygen is as a clinical educator, clinical consultant, and there's a lot of jargon that comes along with that sometimes. But essentially what it means is that I develop resources and training for the workforce, and taking a really broad view of the workforce in terms of youth mental health. And the other part of that is working really closely with young people, with parents and carers and families, and researchers and clinical experts. So trying to bring in this really diverse range of lived experience, professional experience, as well as the research evidence base, and trying to produce something that helps bridge that gap and helps to support best practice. So I'd also like to acknowledge that that I'm joining from the lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and pay my respects to elders past and present. And I had a really nice opportunity to connect with country and go for a walk along the Merri Creek where I live today. So I think it's also important to think about, in terms of school refusal, again, the school environments that Aboriginal and Torres Strait young people are going into, and how we can support and advocate for them to be culturally safe, and so that young people can bring their whole selves and feel proud in how schools recognise Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander young people's strengths in those environments as well, because that's a big part of wanting to go to school is being able to bring your whole self and feeling safe to do that. Okay. And I guess thinking about the objectives today, so starting off by just understanding what school refusal is, what are those early warning signs? So as Megan pointed out, intervening early is a really important part of intervening in terms of school refusal, and we know that intervention in that early stage is really important and is the most effective. Not that there aren't other points for intervention, but if we can recognise those early warning signs and do something at those stages, that's really important. And then thinking about what are the different factors and how can we tailor our interventions for the young people that we're working with. And again, I'd just like to acknowledge that the resources that were developed and that these training slides are based on was really it wouldn't be possible without the range of expertise that people brought to these to the consultations, and like to acknowledge the young people that were involved, as well as the families and carers and their other supporters and kin. As well as the dedicated clinicians and researchers, the Department of Education here in Victoria, and Travancore School as well. So they have a lot of expertise, especially working with young people who face multiple barriers to education in Victoria. And they do, with Orygen, they do longer trainings on school refusal as well. So if you're in Victoria and this is an area that you're interested in, I very much encourage you to engage in further CPD in this area, and they're a great place to look to. So when we're thinking about school attendance and school refusal, just being mindful of the language that we use and acknowledging that there are multiple different terms that can be used, and depending on what sector people are in as well, the language might change. But in our work with young people, trying to use strength-based language and avoid language that labels the young person, so things like a school refuser, a truant, trying to avoid that sort of language. And also acknowledging that, like, when we talked with young people, school refusal and school avoidance might not be something that they connect with. That might not be the language they use. They might think of it more as like a difficulty coping. They just can't cope with what's happening at the moment. So being really attentive to the language that you're using, and also being mindful that labels can stick as well. And depending on the label that the young person gets, it can also influence how they're treated in schools and by services. So just being very mindful of the language that we're using, and I guess if we're noticing that there might be some stigmatizing or unhelpful language that other people are using, can we gently support shifting that? And this table, which is in the resources, just goes over those different types of school attendance difficulties or challenges, and school refusal being the one that we're focusing on today. So when we think about school refusal, we're really thinking about anxiety-based difficulty, and that reluctance or refusal to attend school, which leads to these prolonged absences, that they're often staying at home during these school hours, and that there is knowledge from the carers or the parents that the young person is not at school, that they're at home, and that there's this heightened level of distress about attending school. So there's often a lot of distress before school and anticipation the night before school or leading up to school. And in most cases, carers are doing everything that they can think of to try and help that young person to attend school, but are really challenged by the situation. So I guess I wanted to throw out a question to the group and just ask, why do we think school refusal is important? Why are we talking about it today? Yeah, why is it such an important issue? And feel free to unmute and just call out.
Yeah, just call out if you want, everyone.
I'll be brave and I'll go first.
Thanks, Jenny.
I think for us in family-based care, it's really important. Education is important to our children because we know from the long-term statistics, our kids have fewer kids finish year 12, fewer kids go on to education, higher education, fewer kids that impacts their lifelong earning abilities, their employment outcomes. And the stats are really, the difference between kids in out-of-home care and not are quite significant. The difference is quite significant. So I think those, like the long-term outcomes for them is massive. But we're also thinking on the day-to-day, it's quite possibly somewhere that kids feel safe, that they are being seen by other people. That becomes a protective mechanism. It's important that they are connecting with other people who outside either the family unit, the foster youth care family unit. It's important for them to have that space, and sometimes school is a safe place. Sometimes it can be overwhelming, but sometimes it can put in protective factors.
Yeah, they're all great points, Jenny, and you've sort of answered both questions at once. So double A plus on that one. Not that we're focusing on grades, but that's great. So I guess we're thinking about the short-term impacts, the long-term impacts, and also why it might be particularly important for the young people that you're working with that school can be a really important place of belonging, of having connections outside the family unit and out of the system, and thinking about if those things aren't happening as well, that they can have long-term impacts in terms of education completion as well as earning potentials and lots of other outcomes like physical health and social well-being as well.
Yeah, it's also important to add a few things just with regards to understanding why are they refusing to go to it that is preventing them from being there. And I think sometimes that causal is really important because sometimes it can be not the right environment for them, or there are things going on in that environment, and that through some advocacy can make it a better place for that child. So sometimes it might having, or it could be, that an undiagnosed learning delay. There are so many reasons why children refuse. It might not just be anxiety. There might be a whole plethora. It might be, we had a situation where a young person wouldn't go to school. And when we unpacked out, he wouldn't go to school simply because he was in residential care and had gone back living with his dad unofficially, and refused to go to school because he saw school as a place where he went in the first place. And so therefore going back into that environment would mind, he thought, to taken again. Sorted out, then we were able to, because he loved school, but he went through a school refusal for that very reason. So I think sometimes it's on the surface, we need to unpack it a bit to find out what's going on.
Yeah. That's a great point, Helen, that understanding what is happening and that safety in the school, what's preventing them from wanting to go to school is such an important factor, and definitely something that, yeah, we'll talk a little bit more on next. Did anyone else have any thoughts before we move forward?
Yeah, I was just going to say, oh, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Maddie.
Um, yeah, just to sort of piggyback off what other people were saying, that I think there's sort of two sides to one of like it's important, for everyone to go to school, regardless of if they're in out of home care or not. And something I've come across with some of the young people I've worked with is it's just such a challenging thing, school refusal, where it's really hard to know what's the best response. Like I've sat in meetings with child protection, with carers, and it's like, oh, we've tried this, like what do we do? We're just kind of stumped. Like it's really challenging, and people not really knowing, how to address it, what to do next. But then at the same time, what people were saying earlier about how, especially, oh yeah, especially with one young person I work with, it can kind of be this push and pull where, she doesn't want to go to school, but some of the things she's seeking, like having a bit more connection with people, having, some things to do in the day, she'd be able to get from school, but actually doesn't want to go to school. And some of those things where the school would actually be able to support them in a lot of, the areas that are needed. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's a great metaphor, that push-pull as well, Maddie, and that's definitely something that's come up in developing the resources, that idea that young people are talking about. What are the things there that can potentially pull them into school, and what are the things that kind of push them away from school as well? And having that individualized sort of approach to working with young people. And also acknowledging, I think everyone acknowledging that it is a really difficult sort of, and you can feel like really stuck in moving forward as well. So we might, in the interest of time, we might just go through a little bit more of the presentation and then maybe get back to some of these conversations. So again, just thinking about this idea that school attendance occurs on a spectrum, and ideally we want to be intervening in these early stages where you can kind of make the most impact. And part of that is I guess identifying when there are these early warning signs. So in these sort of green stages, rather than kind of when it gets to the orange. And there's a lot of systemic factors that kind of influences our ability to intervene in these early stages. But I guess it's as a workforce, thinking about what are the tools that we have to kind of be able to identify things early. So another question, what are the early warning signs that in your work with young people that you tend to notice? What do they say? What do they do? Are there other data points that you have access to? And again, just feel free to call out.
I just thinking of a young person on my caseload who's in year 12, and he has had partial attendance for the last 3 years. Without being able to articulate why. And so we've had to just work with the school to make sure that he does pass year 12 on partial attendance. But yeah, it would be nice to know, I guess, what services could support and maybe uncover what's underneath that for him.
Yeah.
Yeah, he just says he doesn't want to go, so the carers know that the school is supportive of the partial attendance, so there is no pressure for him to go. He'll just stay home for the day and then he'll go the next day.
Yeah. Okay. So that's where it's kind of gotten into that longer chronicity of things that's been, 3 years.
3 years. Yep, absolutely.
And are you coming in at that point where it's been sort of a longer period of time, so there hasn't been the capacity to kind of recognize those early warning signs?
Yeah, agreed.
Are there any other thoughts where you have noticed at this earlier stage, or what tends to show up in these earlier stages?
Sophie, I was just going to say the shoes aren't right. No, these are the wrong colour shoes, and there's a 20-minute argument around which shoes are right. And then you might get the young person, I'm thinking of an 11-year-old first year high school, to school and stay for a couple of hours, and then he's texting, I'm leaving, I'm on my way home. So he will eventually go, but there's challenges and road bumps, and then it's not that the shoes are the wrong colour. It's something big is happening, but it's trying to unpack each and every little roadblock and then work out what the pattern is and what the bigger picture for him is.
Yeah, and is that something that you're working with at the moment, Susan? You're working with that?
Unfortunately, he absconded several times from the placement, family-based placement, and it became dangerous. He was running through traffic and things, so he's actually out of that placement now. But we did spend 3 weeks trying to work through. The school weren't very supportive. They would text and say he's left again without really trying to support him to stay. So, yeah, it was very frustrating, but it was definitely the early signs of something not right, big at school.
Yeah. And is that something other people have noticed, sort of small things, delays, difficulties getting ready in the morning? Is that something that people noticed in those early days? Or is there anything else that people might notice either at home or at school that kind of indicates that young people might be in these early stages of a school attendance challenge?
It's just big emotions around not wanting to attend. So whether that's emotional or physical tends to be the first, and then it becomes sometimes a battle with our carers and kids.
Yeah.
Understand why, or how to change that for the young person.
I think social issues can have a big impact on kids. So friendship issues or fights with friends at school can make kids not want to go to school. And then as well as that, like struggling in the learning environment with the actual learning material, whether it be too advanced for them.
Yeah. So the social issues is a really big theme, and can kind of be one of those initial factors or onset factors that kind of influence people's willingness to attend school. And
I have a young person at the moment who's just started to have issues, not with non-school attendance, but it's around, she's moved from like year 10 to year 11, so her subjects had to change, and she was doing really well in Spanish, but the Spanish class was full, and so they put her into Chinese. She doesn't like Chinese. She doesn't do very well at Chinese. But that loss of feeling like she was succeeding in something, and the school's been really reluctant to work with us to move her back or give her any other options. So that's kind of been the trigger point for us. It's around, she was doing really well. Like, this was her best class. She was getting, she was doing really, really well in it. And they took her out, and it's just taken away all her confidence.
Yeah, it's huge to have a thing that you feel like you're successful at.
Yeah.
It builds your sense of self-esteem, and then to be chucked into something that you don't have any choice over as well.
Yeah.
So you lose that sort of autonomy. Can totally, I think we can all relate to feeling why that would kind of reduce our motivation to go to school. So just quickly going over the early warning signs, thinking about what might show up at home, and how we can kind of pay attention to this, and just that recognition that the shoes being the wrong color isn't necessarily the shoes being the wrong color. That young people can feel this feel anxiety related to this as well, in terms of physical complaints and sickness as well. And that there may be times that are more challenging. So thinking after weekends or after holidays where there's a gap from school, that can also be a particular period that we need to be mindful of. And I think the other thing people have talked about as well as those transition periods. So transition into high school being a big one, where young people can feel less safe and connected to schools. And then some of the things that schools might notice, thinking about the unexplained absences, learning difficulties, if there's a change in the way young people participate in class, and requests to go home or to go to sick bay, as well as change in those peer relationships or difficulty in peer relationships. So in the toolkit, we use Kearney's model. So Kearney's one of the, I guess, key researchers, international researchers in terms of school attendance challenges. And he strongly advocates for this multi-tiered system of support, and thinking about those different tiers that kind of map well onto educational interventions as well. And schools are very familiar with the idea of having a tiered approach, so that there's these universal interventions at the base. So thinking about the school climate, how young people feel in the school, how connected they feel in the school, those transition points, cultural safety, and ensuring that there's also monitoring of non-attendance as well. So I think you've already started to mention a bit of frustration that kind of creeps in with dealing with schools, but if there's ways of advocating that schools take on and think of using approaches like that, it's something that, can be really important to think about those multiple tiers and helping them to intervene early and create safe and welcoming environments that young people want to attend. So again, when we looked at the research and when we asked young people about what were the things that were, I guess, it's a good sort of analogy, that push-pull. What were the things that were kind of leading them to not want to attend school, and particularly that like onset factors? It was really these ideas around peer relationships. So when there's bullying, intimidation, relational aggression, conflict, and when school staff don't intervene early in these things, that can really be an onset factor. There can also be difficulties in sort of conforming to the social norms or forming friendships, which can make attending school difficult, as well as relationships with adults. So if teachers are kind of perceived as strict and unfair or unpredictable and unhelpful, like they don't care about the young person, that can really precipitate or drive some of these school attendance difficulties. We talked about transition periods, and I think also someone mentioned that those learning difficulties. So if you're struggling in class and your needs aren't really being met, adaptations aren't, like the necessary adaptations aren't being delivered, and you're not really understanding the content. School and learning is an experience where you feel like a failure or you feel not smart enough. It's very understandable again why you wouldn't want to keep on attending those classes. So yeah, those are some of the factors that young people described as sort of the onset factors. And then some of the maintenance factors also were how people responded. So when young people expressed their emotions or their difficulties, did people tend to blame them, or were they supportive? So some of those things kind of led to the ongoing maintenance of school attendance challenges. There were also some things about like personal beliefs about attendance. So whether people perceive, like whether young people thought, oh, this is something that I have a say in, or I can do something about, or was it perceived as this is someone else's issue or someone else's responsibility? And also things about being perceived as different. And I think that's something that comes up so often working with young people and thinking about the importance of kind of having that social group and feeling like you're fitting in. This feeling different can really perpetuate avoidance of that environment. So this is also something that people have said, that if you don't understand what the drivers are for the non-attendance, then the strategies that you implement aren't going to be effective. So it's really about how do you start to uncover what's happening, what's making school a sort of negative or unsafe environment for the young person. And yeah, thinking about some of these factors. So does anyone, like in their day-to-day practice, how do you start to uncover what some of these factors might be? Like what avenues do you have available to you?
I think speaking with the school,
Yeah.
see what they've observed. Sometimes our young people aren't able to articulate in words what's going on for them. And in the case of the young person that I have on partial attendance, that's what we did, because he's just not able to tell us what it is. There's a few of those boxes that he does tick, and the school's just accepting of what he can do and where he's at.
And who in the school do you speak to?
It's a team, so it's it's like an Aboriginal learning officer, and so they have a dedicated learning hut that the students can go to when the classroom is too much, and they can complete their work there on site. SLSO and normally a head teacher of the grade. I think in high school they have like head grade teachers.
Yeah.
And the carer advocates quite strongly as well. So that's how we've been able to have this young person be on a life skills program, which is, I think, a different workload, partial attendance, but still with an outcome of completing year 12. So really driven by the school, I guess.
Yeah, and it sounds like having that communication where everyone's in the same room, or at least just like able to have two-way communication is important.
Yeah, because we can only evidence so much from the young person that he's willing to share with us around why he prefers to only go, certain days. But the school have just accepted, I guess, that is what his goal is of completing year 12, but he's just not able to do it 5 days a week.
Yeah. Thanks, Rebecca. Anyone else have any other ways that they kind of try and untangle or think about, picking out some of these factors?
Oh, I have a question.
Yeah.
Like I in my team have a lot of challenges with this one young person we've been working with because like we've talked to her a lot and asked her, but it's also been a situation and asked the carer, but she's been in a lot of different placements, like dozens, and never had a stable placement in her whole life. So there's no one like up till 16 to ask about that continuity. And she really just says, oh, I just don't like school. And when she was going and people were really commending her on that, her going was just 1 day a week for an hour and a half to the art class, and she's on a tailored, like a altered, timetable hours, and it sort of seems like it wasn't one of the factors here, but a factor for her is also that she's always been on altered school hours, like really limited school hours, like 1 hour days for like 2 or 3 days for her whole life. So that's kind of her like normal. So if she goes like once a week, she's kind of like, oh, well, I went to school, or like, oh, I just missed school. If she missed like the 1 day of the week, even though she's like hasn't been to school for the whole week, there's also like that experience, like expectations as well. And I haven't found the school to be that helpful. Like, I don't know, they sort of appear as if they've given up on her. They're like, oh, she hasn't even, we can't write an SST, we can't write an IEP for her because she hasn't attended enough. Yeah, like I haven't had a great experience with the school, and they haven't done outreach or anything like that. It's sort of been all all on like the carer or us. Like I'm with the foster care agency, and and the child protection of like, oh, what are they doing and what is the carer doing, and has the carer tried this and has the carer tried that. Yeah.
So there's a few factors kind of that you're talking about there, Maddie.
Yeah.
That it's hard to get a longitudinal or like a long-term perspective if this person's moved placement so many times, to have that person that really knows them and can kind of think about, oh, what were the times where they were doing like better? What are the things that kind of make it more challenging for them? But also there seems to be a lot of expectation on the carer, and maybe not that much. It feels like maybe some of the responsibility could shift a little bit in terms of what the school could do.
Yeah.
The other thing that kind of comes to mind also is thinking about the use of these plans, and how do we make them not a static thing? Like, how is that a plan that can still have hope for things to change, and how is that communicated with the young person as well, to kind of that build that, rather than this being okay, this is the expectation. And some young people, it might not be that we could move at a fast pace, but maybe there's maybe it's that regularity in checking in and seeing, or is there more that could be pulling you into school? Is there more that you could want to engage in as well? So it seems like there's a lot to pull with, and a lot to think about. And I guess just again, in the interest of time, because it seems like there's so much that we could talk about, and that I would love to talk to you about, but thinking about some of the basic things that we can do in terms of the young people, the people working with the young people in the mornings, thinking about consistent routines, calm and non-escalating responses, and that focus on predictability and safety. I think also that validation of distress, so not minimizing the distress, because the distress that the young person's experiencing in those moments is really real to them, and it does feel often terrifying and really overwhelming. So how can we acknowledge that whilst also not reinforcing that avoidance in the moment? And how can we kind of start small and celebrate partial success as well? So things, really breaking it down into the sort of the granular things, like getting dressed for school, sitting in the car, attending one class, as well as what we kind of talked about in terms of that regular review, and where there might be opportunities to move forward in these really small steps. One of the things that came up a lot was in terms of how do we tap into those factors that help young people want to go to school. So this is a quote from one of the clinical leads at Headspace, and how she kind of asks young people about school, and often it's that relational connection, and having those teachers that are able to see see them and really celebrate their successes, even when they are small successes. Again, things we've talked about, so that regular two-way communication, trying to have at least one regular contact person, so the communication isn't split amongst multiple people at the school. And another thing is, how do we move these conversations away from blame? So one of the things we heard from carers and families was that often they felt really blamed by the school for not getting the young person there. And that's something that when we talk to school staff is really emphasising, how do we move away from that blame? Because often everyone in the situation is really trying their best, and also thinking about the context of school and school staff being really stretched. And I guess for us in Victoria, that's sort of front of mind with the teachers' strike on yesterday as well. And again, thinking about re-engagement, how do you start by building trust, routine, realistic expectations? And I guess it sounds like being really creative in how you involve that young person in any return to school or adjustment plans. And then there's a few things that might be helpful depending on the young person you're working with in terms of building those smaller steps. So I might just stop sharing my screen now. And I know that we've kind of pushed time out a bit. Megan, how are we going? Do we have time for?
I think so. Yeah, go for it.
So yeah, I guess opening out to the room, are there questions? Are there thoughts? Are there ways that you work that you found helpful?
I just noticed on that last slide there was a point around walking or getting to school with a trusted friend or adult.
Yeah.
So we had a young person whose attendance wasn't great, and one of the carers got really sick, and so they had to ask another person to do the transport. And that little change, because that person was younger in age, made the difference. We don't know why, but this young person's attendance then increased because he was looking forward to doing that school run with this younger person as well. I think they're on their P's or something. So yeah, but it actually made a difference in that, changing that morning school routine.
Yeah, so that looking forward to spending time with another young person, was it, Rebecca?
Yeah, so they went from partial attendance to full attendance for I think it was like 2 terms, which was amazing. Yeah, and so then the carer said, "Oh, we'll just keep that in place then, because that's working." Yeah.
Oh, that's great. It maybe not a planned intervention, but
no, it wasn't. But it's something I'll remember in my toolkit. That's for sure.
Yeah. Donna, did you have a question or a thought? You're just on mute.
Oh, that's me. That's me always on mute. Those that work with me know that that's a common thing. No, I have a lot. I'm the education consultant for Life Without Barriers, so I work quite a bit with school refusal, and like everything that you said resonated to me. And actually, it's been really good because it's reinforced the fact that I'm on the right path, which is always really nice. But sometimes I think people have an unrealistic expectation of what the kids can really do.
Yeah.
Like I've got a girl, and her biggest barrier is the shorts. They make her bum look big. She's 15. And that is for her. I'm not wearing them anymore. I don't feel good. Every time I walk in the door, I don't feel good. And that has taken a while to be validated. And now it's like she's choosing her new school by the uniform.
Yeah.
So that they're very real, very, very real. And like while people are here, they're here interested to know. But those who aren't, they don't get that. So that cycle seems to go round and round and round and round and round. And oh, you just need to go to school. You just need to go to school. You know, well, I can't because
Yeah,
yeah.
The aspect of taking young people's perspectives and what's important to them really seriously, even if in your adult brain you're like, oh, you know, just get over it, that no one's looking at your bum.
No, no, but you know, they are when you're 15 and you think
Yeah.
you need to be finding a boyfie. You know?
Exactly.
That's
So
really important. Yeah, I know. So there's lots of reasons, you know, like, and it just, if you don't get onto it, it just grows. It just becomes so hard, you know, because then there's the element of shame, then there's the element of fear, then there's the element of not having the learning materials in your brain anymore because you've filled it with other things. So, you know, it's a huge jump to go back to school.
yeah, and I think that also thinking about how you support young people to keep connected and keep with that stuff if they do have a period of non-attendance, because it can build over time. And if you think that you've missed 5 math classes and you're already struggling with it anyway, yeah.
Yeah, and sometimes you don't get that welcome when you come in when you've missed 5 maths classes.
No.
No, so you know it's just like it's a multitude of things. It's a real jigsaw puzzle that you have to put together really to. You know, it's like a tripod approach, I guess. You just have to prop it up from everywhere you go till you can stand on your own.
Yeah, and I guess it's relational in how you work with all the different stakeholders as well.
Yeah, most definitely.
Any other thoughts or questions, comments? Well, I'd just like to say thank you so much for having me. It's been really great to hear about the context that you're working in and the young people that you're working with, and your dedication to kind of doing this in that really, it is a tricky thing to work with, and something that can feel really like you can feel a lack of success as well. So I think being really careful in how you care for yourself in these moments too, and acknowledge for yourself any small moments of success or any bright sparks as well, because it can be a long journey to help young people achieve their goals in terms of re-engagement.
Thank you, Sophie. That was really lovely interaction today, everybody. It's lovely to have those yarns, and I think we could have them for a long time and we can revisit again. You know, there's a lot of thanks coming through the comments there, Sophie, but I will let everybody go and have the rest of their days. But I know you'll join me in thanking Sophie for being here today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.